last lesson by talking about how a new section emerged within the third estate itself and how this new section galvanized the energy and the ideas that were required for the outbreak of the French Revolution. So this lesson will be devoted to understanding the growth of the middle class that happened in the French society right before the outbreak of the French Revolution. When we were discussing the faltering French economy in the last lesson, we found out how the peasants and the workers were very oppressed. They were not able to feed themselves. They were not able to sustain themselves because they were unable to afford even the basic food items. This is the reason why several peasant protests broke out in the Kingdom of France between 1785 and 1789. So at this point the ground was absolutely fertile for the outbreak of the French Revolution. The peasants were angered, they were starving, they were hungry, and they were no longer willing to accept the oppression that was meted out to them by the first two estates. But only anger and vengeance cannot take any individual, or for that matter any group, ahead for a long time. Because the peasants were angered, they were rising in rebellion, but they did not have the education that was required for the organization of a proper revolution. Because a revolution does not happen overnight. A revolution is about bringing new changes in the society, in the political systems, in the culture of any nation, of any kingdom or empire. And without proper knowledge, without proper enlightened ideas, it is impossible to bring about changes in the society. And sadly enough, the peasants in the French society lacked this amount of knowledge. We have learned that they were uneducated masses. How would they have the ideas that were required for bringing about changes in the society? All the rebellions that were breaking out in different parts of France during the period between 1785 and 1789 were very isolated in nature, because these rebellions were not unified under a single cause. The peasants were reeling under the oppression meted out to them by the first two estates, but they did not have the knowledge to mobilize the masses. They did not have the knowledge to put forward their ideas. But who do you think played a very important role in giving the third estate proper leadership and paving the way towards the outbreak of the French Revolution? Well, it was the middle class of the French society. Now you must be questioning the middle class as in the middle of what? Let me tell you something. The third estate comprised all the people of the French society apart from the monarchy, the clergy and the royalty and nobility. So all the people, be that merchants, bankers, traders, artisans, craftspersons, lawyers, doctors, were clubbed together in the third estate and they were called the commoners. But within this third estate there was a section of people who were educated, who were not poverty stricken. And these people comprised the middle class of the French society. They came between or in the middle of the landed nobles on the one hand and the poor peasants on the other hand, which is why they are known as the middle class. But a very particular terminology emerged in the French society around this time, and that was used to refer to the middle class. Well, these people were called the bourgeoisie. Now the bourgeoisie comprised a very important and prominent section within the third estate itself. Now you must be questioning, who were the people who came under this category of the bourgeoisie? Well, it were mostly the doctors, lawyers, merchants, artisans and learned men. From this you can understand that these were all professionals in the French society. These were proper educated people. They could not be clubbed together with the peasants who were illiterate masses. But as the estate system was in place, these people were also clubbed together as the commoners. Now the bourgeoisie spearheaded change in the French society because they no longer wanted to restrict themselves to the position or status of commoner, of literally everyone else in the French society. So let us now look at the bourgeoisie in greater detail and understand who these people were. We have just learned that lawyers, doctors, merchants, traders, craftspersons were the ones who were considered the bourgeoisie. Now, three very important points to be kept in our minds about the bourgeoisie would be that they were urban centered. So, by urban centered we mean that these people lived mostly in the urban and the city spaces. They did not live in the rural spaces. Because this is understandable. The rural spaces were the places where agriculture was mostly pursued and the peasants lived in the rural spaces. As opposed to that, these people who were learned and educated stayed in the urban spaces. The second very important point to be kept in our minds would be that they were affluent. Now, because they were staying in the urban spaces, they had the ways and the opportunities to gain and amass wealth. Now, their wealth was not hereditary like that of the nobles, like that of the royalty. Instead, it was through their hard work, through their diligence and merit that these people became affluent and prominent in the French society. And a point that we have been discussing about the bourgeoisie all this while is that they were educated. So they were learned men, they were all professionals, they had knowledge and education that were required to be aware of their position in the society. Now, on account of their education or even their affluence, these were the people who wanted change in the society. Because the bourgeoisie were interested to reform their position in the French society and they offered leadership to the third estate. We have learnt that the merchants and traders were also a part of the bourgeoisie. Sometimes they possessed as much land as the nobles themselves. So these people could in no way be considered the commoners or members of the third estate. And they wanted to reform their position in society. They wanted to rise up the social ladder. For that, they realized that if they were to spearhead change, they had to offer leadership to the third estate. The third estate comprised the majority of the French population, and it was the bourgeoisie that now started leading and heading the third estate. Now, the growth of the bourgeoisie was facilitated by a bigger movement that was taking place in Europe around this time. The bourgeoisie harbored new ideas of change and reformation. They were not uneducated and illiterate and happy with being where they were. Now, this period between the 17th and the 18th centuries witnessed the age of enlightenment in Europe. As the name suggests, this was a period of knowing the society and the world in better ways. And during this time, major changes and transformations and developments were happening in all fields, be that in the fields of science, arts, literature, theology, religion. And because of all these changes and transformations that were happening in the European societies, many intellectual, philosophical and scientific developments were taking place. And during this age of enlightenment, the ideas of reason, and rationality gained prominence, because it is only through reason that one can understand their position in the society. It is only through reason that one can move ahead of the clutches of ignorance. And rationality helps one understand scientifically and logically the various evils that are present in the society and how those could be gotten rid of. Now, the concepts of reason and rationality spread like wildfire during the Age of Enlightenment throughout Europe. And needless to mention, you can understand that how these ideas of reason and rationality also spread and entered the minds of the bourgeoisie, which is why the bourgeoisie were thinking of change and reformation in the French society. Now, during the Age of Enlightenment, in different parts of Europe, many philosophers and thinkers were putting forward their ideas through lectures and writings and essays and books. Now, Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire and Rousseau challenged the despotic powers of the royalty and the clergy. Now, what do we mean by this? The royalty and the clergy have held immense power and authority over not just the Kingdom of France, but over different monarchies and kingdoms throughout Europe through the medieval times. Now, the royalty was sanctioned by the idea of divinely ordained kings. It was believed that the king or the monarch was a direct descendant of God, and it was God who ordained who would be the next monarch. So the monarchs presented their rule and authority in such a way that they were not accountable to anyone. Their rule could not be opposed by any citizen of the kingdom or the empire. And the clergy also proposed that these people belonged to the direct descendants of God. They had direct connection to God. And by these privileges of direct connection and descendants of gods, as they believed and wanted people to believe, these royalty and clergy exploited the masses. The masses were meant to believe that these people were all divinely ordained, which is why their rule can never be contested, which is why their power can never be overthrown. Now, when the Enlightenment thinkers started proposing their own ideas, the masses were made aware that these powers that these people exercised and possessed were despotic in nature. These powers were tyrannical. These powers were meant to exploit and oppress the people who came beneath or under them. And it is only with the help of Enlightenment thinkers in the likes of Voltaire and Rousseau that the masses were now aware of their position in the society. And by the masses, we mean the bourgeoisie who had access to the writings of these Enlightenment thinkers, well, thanks to their educated backgrounds. Now, along with challenging the powers of the clergy and the royalty, the Enlightenment thinkers now started proposing the idea of democracy. A democracy is one in which people get to exercise their own say. People get to have a say in the political system, in the government. And democracy as a concept is completely opposed to the despotic powers that the clergy and the royalty had over the people. And the bourgeoisie was being inspired by the democratic ideas of different philosophers and thinkers like John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Montesquieu. Now, these thinkers and philosophers wrote many very influential books that inspired and at the same time influenced the bourgeoisie. Now, John Locke wrote a very influential series of 2 books called The 2 Treatises of Government. Now, in this book called The 2 Treatises of Government, John Locke contested the divine right of kings. Because we have talked about how the kings wanted people to believe that their rule was divinely ordained. It was God who said that the kings or the monarchs would rule the lands and the people. Now John Locke in this book contested the divine right of kings, and at the same time he proposed a form of government that was founded on a social contract. Contract between whom? Between the people and their representatives. So can you understand how this was slowly a step taken towards the concept of democracy? Because in this form of a government that was founded on social contract, the people got to choose their representatives, which is in a way resembling the power structure or the system in a democracy. And now these people would be bound in a social contract in the sense that these people would have to give up certain rights in order to be protected by their representatives. So this was a very radical idea that was put forward by John Locke. Now let me ask you a question before learning more about the Enlightenment philosophers and how they continued to inspire and influence the bourgeoisie. Which of these books contested the divine right of kings and inspired the French masses? Was it the two treatises of government, Poetics, On the Origin of Species, or Utilitarianism? Well, the correct answer is Two Treatises of Government. This seminal and influential book written by John Locke inspired the bourgeoisie to contest the divine right of kings, and it also proposed a new form of government. Now, building on the ideas that were put forward by John Locke, Montesquieu also put forward his own ideas in a book called The Spirit of the Laws. Now in this book he talked about the various branches of the government. He discussed how the power of the government should be divided among separate branches, which are the executive, the legislature and the judiciary. Now don't these terms sound quite familiar to you? It does, right? Because these ideas or these branches of government like executive, legislature and judiciary are what we witness and experience in modern day independent liberal democracies. Now these Enlightenment thinkers and philosophers' influence was not restricted to the continent of Europe alone. Why am I saying this? This is because Montesquieu's proposal of the division of the power of the government inspired and influenced the founding fathers of the United States of America. So across the Atlantic, his ideas now inspired people in the United States of America. And these branches of government like executive, legislature and judiciary are what we see in independent United States of America. So from this we can understand how important and sustaining was the influence of these Enlightenment thinkers and philosophers between the 17th and the 18th centuries. Now when the bourgeoisie got access to the writings of the Enlightenment thinkers and philosophers, their minds were filled with new ideas. They no longer wanted to live in that age-old estate system that was oppressive and unequal in nature. Now they were looking forward to having new forms of government as was proposed by the Enlightenment thinkers and philosophers. And so, inspired by the Enlightenment thought, the bourgeoisie now demanded equal political rights for all the citizens. Now by equal political rights, they wanted to mention that the erstwhile division of the society in the form of the estate system should be abolished. And only by abolishing that, all the citizens of the French society would be there on equal grounds. They would no longer be given extra privileges or discriminated against. And a very radical idea that was put forward by the Enlightenment thinkers and then that was also taken up by the bourgeoisie was a government that was established by the consent of people. So in simple terms, it actually means democracy. A democracy is a form of government in which people get to elect their own representatives. So in democracies, people are not ruled by the rulers and monarchs and emperors who might or might not be despotic and tyrannical by spirit. Instead, people get to choose their own representatives. And a democratic system of governance is what the bourgeoisie was now trying to bring about in the French society itself. And while they were inspired by the Enlightenment thinkers, many new ideas came to the fore, among which the most important would be the ideas of liberty, equality and fraternity. Now these concepts gained great popularity among the masses. But I am sure you are questioning, what do these terms liberty, equality and fraternity mean? Well, liberty means the freedom to express oneself, the freedom to express dissent and be independent in the truest sense of term. Now when we come to the concept of equality, we can understand that this concept proposes that all citizens would be equal. There should remain no divisions and segregations in the society that causes rift and divisions and discriminations among the various sections of the population. And by fraternity we mean brotherhood. Now the bourgeoisie wanted liberty for all the citizens so that they could express their dissent, so that they could express clearly what they felt without the feeling of being persecuted. They also wanted to be seen as equal citizens with all the members of the French society. They did not want the age-old estate system to be in place any longer. And finally, by fraternity, they meant that all the citizens of France should be tied together by one unified identity, which would be that they were French citizens. The citizens should not be divided like this person belongs to the first estate, this person belongs to the second estate and this person belongs to the third estate. Instead, they should all be considered brothers and sisters of each other, and they should all be clubbed and considered together as French citizens. Now these concepts of liberty, equality and fraternity became the clarion call of the French Revolution, in the sense that these ideas were put forward in ways more than one, oftentimes throughout the course of the French Revolution. Now in a subsequent lesson, we will find out how the revolution finally broke out and what shape it took over the years. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers, or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.